Hello, welcome to the channel, thanks for watching, and it's back onto Necromunda and deep into the underhive on this video, painting a servitor Ogryn. Now I've had this model in a pile of shame for a long time, so it's about time we got it off it. Sprayed it black first, sprayed it with a lead belcher undercoat before we're starting on the base layers. The first base layer we're going for is a pale brown colour onto a lot of the leather areas on the model. So we're wearing like a leather tabard, he's that kind of workman, leather kind of putties around the boots, and I've gone for a pale colour because then we can do, like with the next step here, a slightly darker red leather colour for certain parts of the straps, because on this model a lot of the straps kind of go over other leather areas, so selecting two different colours is quite good. Cleaning up a mistake there, you see onto the metal edge with a wet brush. If you do mistakes as you go in, and you will do, just again, very quickly, clean the paint off your brush, bit of water on the end of the brush there, and you can wipe it off. You'll notice when I'm going on to the areas that I've already put some colour next to, so like here I'm working on the blue on the trouser leg, you'll notice I go a lot more careful when I'm putting that paint down, because it's harder to clean paint off when you go onto another paint layer that you've already done rather than being into the base coat. Now quite a lot of flesh shown on the model, so I'm going for a dwarf skin here. It's a slightly darker skin tone than I normally use on the channel. You know, so I can tend to do a flat flesh, which is quite a pale flesh, but given that this is a big bulky kind of Ogryn colour, is very going to be dirty and dark and grimy in the underhive, I thought I'd go for a slightly darker flesh tone. Now onto the boots. So this is the second kind of leather on the boots we're putting here. So I'm going for a black leather onto the actual base of the boot with that putty kind of going over it, giving a nice contrast. And again, using a small brush because there's lots of little gaps and cracks to get that into, to get the leather showing through. Moving the black, you see I've already edged the base black, but taking some of that black onto some of the pipes and cables on the model. Now I'm going to use some different colours on the pipes later, but it doesn't hurt to have some low tones. Now hazard stripes, you cannot be on Necromunda without hazard stripes, and this model, very industrial, absolutely fits having a go at doing hazard stripes. Now it's a great model to try it on because its kind of armoured shield is fairly small, but it'll be fairly impactful. I've done the first stripe based on the corner angle of this shield, and done the width of it matching kind of where the armour panel then starts to curve outwards. That defines the rest of the stripes. I am doing it by eye, so it's a little bit hit and miss, but what I would always recommend doing stripes is don't try and paint the edges of the stripe, if that makes sense. Use the brush to define the middle of the stripe, let the brush sort of splay outwards and let that define the width, and with a bit of practice you'll get it kind of right of where you start it off. Always good to practice on something like this where the actual panel isn't perfectly flat, so if you make a couple of mistakes and you make one line wider than the other, etc., it's not going to stand out as much as if you try it on a flat panel. And then when you do try it on flat panels, you've had that practice at laying down the different widths of the stripes, if that makes sense. So filling in the rest of the stripe with a nice deep yellow, couple of layers of paint on here you will see, because again it's a bit of a thinner paint to kind of build up over the top. So yeah, what I would say with a technique like this is just give it a go. You know, no one's ever perfect. Well, some people are perfect doing this kind of technique, but you know, give it a practice. A great area to do it on. You will notice as well in the later film, I do it on the knee panel, so his left knee, and I also do it on the kind of little back panel area where he's got his little harpoony type device. So give it a go. You know, if you make a mistake, well, you could just paint the whole thing black and then carry on. You know, but give it a go. So moving on to the rest of it, I actually thought these were grenades when I first started painting them, so I painted them red because they look a bit like a crack grenade type thing, but I think they're actually kind of fuel cells, which you will see slotted into the back of the arc weldery thing he's got on his shoulder. Picked a scorpion green for the lens. I wanted something a little bit sort of vibrant onto there. I want a lot of the colours muted, but it's nice to pop out some vibrancy with like the red, the green, the yellow, but the clothing's sort of relatively muted. And then I've also taken that scorpion green colour into what looked like the energy coils kind of on the back of this welder. I don't know if that's what they are, but you know, it doesn't matter. I've just picked a colour, painted it, gone for it, just to give that little bit of interesting detail around there. You'll also notice as well that I've painted the base with some yellow stripes and kind of things in there to match in with what I've done on the rest of my Necromunda bases and my scenery that you'll see later. So I have done a Necromunda Ogryn before, many years ago, before the channel even started. So this thing has been on the pile of shame for about 4 years. So I'm not really even matching that Ogryn because that Ogryn's gone out of my collection now. But I am matching it to the rest of my kind of Necromunda kind of scenery and gangs and sort of what I've used in there. So taking a retributor armour, which is a lovely brass colour, just gives a nice aged effect. And I don't know how this technology works, but it feels like brass on the end of something that basically is like a welder. Would seem to fit in quite nicely. And I've dropped that brass onto like the grills around the model. Certain panels you'll see later on when you do a full reveal, you'll see where the rest of the brass has gone. Also taking a small brush and dropping it onto the nuts and bolts around the model just for a bit of interest. And again, you can see there, slight mistake made, not a problem, wet brush and take that back off. You can also see some little stripes I've put on the back of this kind of harpoon grapnel thing that he's got on there, so dropping a few more areas on is easy. And again, like I said, practice it on a strange shaped area or a small area, build up your kind of skill at doing those stripes. Now, what am I doing here? I'm taking a sponge and I'm dropping it into some gunmetal colour, and then I'm dabbing it very, very gently on the shield that I've painted. So why am I doing this? Well, the rest of the model, the armour on the gaps and cracks is going to show through. Here, because I laid down the black and the silver quite solidly to get the stripes right, it meant that I didn't really show any of that kind of damaged metallic showing through. So this is a way of remedying it and making it look a bit like the other metallic areas are going to look. So just to make it a little bit more bashed, because although the hazard stripes are there, it won't be perfect because it's Necromunda. Now, Vallejo sepia wash over the entirety of the model, and this will dull down all the colours we've already put on, but it will also do, you notice I haven't done anything to the silver areas of the metal. It will take those silver areas of the metal and make them look a bit rusted, a bit bashed, a bit chipped, and really sort of make it grimy underhive. And that's the primary reason that I undercoat with a black and then a lead belcher colour, because it saves a vast amount of time painting the metallics later. Can slow you down slightly doing some other colours, having to do 2 or 3 layers on top, but so much faster doing metallics. So here we're at the highlight stage. So really all I'm doing is taking the exact same colours I've already used, very edge of the brush, and doing an edge highlight on the raised areas. Now what I'm doing here, I've done the edge highlight, and I'm taking a little bit of that paint that's been on my wet palette and almost glazing over the flat area with that pale brown colour, because I didn't like the edge highlight that I'd done. So a little bit of a glaze to bring the whole area colour up just fixes that problem. But you see here, working through the colours that I've already used, putting it on the very edge, and literally take the folds of the cloth or the metal or whatever you're putting it on, and really it's to put it on the areas where the light would hit and give it an extra pop of colour. And it's kind of a way of cheating with that wash area, and then dulls the colour down, and then use exactly the same colour to highlight. You'll see they're just showing you that I do paint the base edges black, and as I'm at the stage here of topping up the black details, bit of paint on the base, happy days. Now when I'm doing the stripe here, I'm not covering every last area of this metal, because obviously I've taken the effort of putting that sort of chipped metal effect on to make it look a bit bashed. So I'm just picking out a couple of areas to put the black and the yellow onto here, whilst having that metallic damage showing through. But also I'm trying not to cover all the areas that wash has dulled down, because you want to have sort of 3 or 4 different colours showing through. You don't want to cover the whole areas. Now, again, you see here, just going back over exactly the same colours. Happy days. All the colours I've used have been at the sort of top left of the screen, but obviously it's just sort of some inspiration. Now, when I was doing it, I didn't like the look of the straps on the legs there, because I thought they were a bit flat and dull. So I've taken the pale brown and I'm using that as the kind of highlight colour on the stitching on there. And I also decided to do the bolts on the shield, which I hadn't done up until this point. I'd done a lot of the bolts around the rest of the model with that kind of retributor armour for brass. Thought actually the shield's missing a little bit of pop, so put some of that brass onto the shield. Again, talking about pop, I thought the yellow was a little bit dull. We want it to look a bit bashed, but as an additional highlight there, I took a contrast paint, a Bad Moon Yellow, real nice vibrant yellow contrast paint, and drop some of that onto these stripes. Now it's important to note, as I'm going through all this paint scheme, some of this looks really bright when you first put it on, and paint does that. It will look a lot brighter than it is eventually going to dull down to, so it will dull down a little bit. And actually on that yellow, although it's not coming out on camera, there are sort of 3 or 4 different yellow tones coming through, but it does look very flat on camera, just how the camera's picking it up. I am only recording this on an iPhone, so nothing scientific on this channel. Now going on to the flesh, exactly the same technique, just kind of putting a little bit more than I have elsewhere, so more of a glaze on some of the areas here, but it is an edge highlight where the muscle's kind of on thin areas. Now I was quite happy with how the flesh was coming up, but I thought, you know, this is underhive, he's got a big mechanical arm bursting out of his flesh. I wanted him to look a little bit ill, so I've taken some Plague Bearer flesh, and I'm putting that as again a glaze across all the flesh areas, a little bit heavier near where his sort of augmetic arm and stuff is bursting out the skin, so I imagine that would be a little bit worse. But it just kind of tones the flesh down. I said at the start, I don't want it to be too bright and vibrant, because he is, in the underhive, is going to be dank and dirty and probably quite ill. So taking now a Blood for the Blood God, which is, well, as it says, a blood effect, and I'm putting that on all the areas where the flesh meets the metallic, and that's it. Paint scheme done. A little bit of a quick rotation here. I quite like the bloody areas. I quite like how the flesh has gone. Fun to experiment with kind of yellow striping, and nice to do a bit of a different model and get back into the underhive for a while. And here he is in some of my underhive scenery. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again.